Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You are listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh Blissett. And then alongside me virtually is my co-host, Josh Crouch. And we are going to talk to Keziah Robinson about how to stop helicoptering your service business. This is really cool. I'll actually let Josh do a quick introduction, and I'm super excited, but I like to take over the intros. So I'm done. I'm going to cut it off and let Josh take it from here.
Yeah. So this is actually a great topic now that I think this helicopter parenting your business there's so much to the, so much to this because these are your essentially your non-children's children. I mean, everyone babies their business and it is their life. And if they don't stop trying to oversee every aspect of their business, this is where people get super stressed out, and then they start going down different deep, dark holes. So this is an awesome topic, especially with the last year, because I think a lot of people in the last 12 to 16 months have literally just been like, well, I have nothing else better to do, so I might as well work. And they forget to do some of these other things to help back up from their business and enjoy some of the successes and some of the things that come along with business ownership.
Cool. So would you like to share a little bit about you, your background, your history? What makes you an expert in being able to tell us about what to do about helicoptering our business?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I use different titles depending on who I'm talking to, but I call myself like a CEO and founder coach. So I work with small business CEOs and I really help them navigate the operational challenges, but also the existential challenges, right? The who am I challenges of scaling up a business, maybe shifting gears if it's not working out. And ultimately, for a lot of people, figuring out how you can take something you built around yourself and turn it into something that you could sell or transition to the next generation. So that's the kind of work that I do. And I actually started my career. It's funny. I've had a lot of different jobs along the way. But I started my career in the science world. And I always really liked the part of that, which was the way that you were really trying to distill things down, right, to the most simple principles and then build from there. So I work a lot with I call minimum viable structure. It's like, what do we need to put around that will help you run the business without coming in with the whole manual, right? And I know that that's something, and some clients want a full manual and, they may be better suited to someone else, but I really come to them with, who are you? What are your strengths? What's your team's strength? And then how do we build, right, a business that is going to function? And ultimately, if they're looking at transition, this is where the helicopter parenting comes in. We look at how do you extract yourself from that? And what is the necessary, what is it, not just the minimum viable structure that need to go around you, but now what is the business as its own thing? What does your kid need? Right? Because that may be different from what you needed especially when you started the business or when you were early in the business. So I tend to look at it in terms of really helping people figure out how to grow into the next thing so they can stop trying to hold on to the old thing, right? And you think of this, what do parents do? Like, why are you driving to your kids are, at school and college or trade school, and you're driving there to do their laundry? Why would you ever do that? Right. Don't you have something better to do on Saturday?
Oh yeah, I do.
This is to right. But to Josh's point, people are, don't you have something better to do than just work all the time? And the problem is usually the answer is no. I haven't really gotten in touch with what they would really want to do if they weren't
true. I am
managing
so
the day-to-day.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but you're hitting resonating right in my wheelhouse, and it's quite comical in a weird way that Josh created a post in our Facebook group. Was it yesterday? That pretty much is exactly what you're talking about. And my comment, which was probably one of the first ones, was, what do you mean time off? Like, are you kidding?
That was exactly your comment.
Right.
And it's like exactly what you're saying there. It's like, when I do have time off, it's typically very much like still thinking about work. Like maybe I'm not working physically, but it's thinking about different marketing ideas or how they made this work and that idea.
Right.
Like, it doesn't turn off for me.
Well, it doesn't have to fully turn off. That's one of those things is that I meet people, especially if I'm working with a client who's closer to transition, and they'll always, usually by then people are burnt out, right? So it's like, well, what's the goal? We do goal planning. What's the goal? What are you going to do? What's on the other side of this transaction? Like, let's say you're leaving the business. And it's like, I'm going to just sit on the beach and relax. And I'm like, okay, great. Go to the beach for 3 weeks. Okay, then what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And we start to really peel into like, what are the things we really think are important? And so if you want to work until you die in your business, you can sell the business and work until you die, right? But you have to set the business up so that, and you have to, this to the helicopter parenting, you got to let somebody else take the reins in order and do the job that you're there for, which might be being, an advisor. But if you don't want to hire somebody who's going to listen to you all the time. That's not the point.
True.
Right? That's not the point of growing a business. You're trying to find somebody who has better ideas than you do. So absolutely. I think a lot of times, we get really fixated on the idea that when the other thing is going to be like nothing, right? It's a vacuum. Like, oh yeah, it's nice to go to the beach. Or here's the deal. People always like, you'll spend more time with your kids. Let me tell you, after this year, people do not want to spend more time with their kids. They don't want to spend more time with their spouse. Right? This is not the goal. So there's a lot of times with the goal setting piece, which is like really early in the coaching programs I do, it's really like, what are the things that you really want that really matter to you so that you can really get emotionally invested in those and use that to draw you when it's hard to let somebody else, take a sales call, do estimates. I mean, the stuff that people are like terrified of delegating.
Yeah, because you do really have like, I could feel anxiety just creeping up as far as like, oh, you want someone else to do that? At least let me look at it before you send it.
Right.
CC me on it, maybe.
Right.
Like,
and then you're complaining how you have so many emails, right? But then you're like, why do I have 1,000 unread emails? And it's like, well, you told people to CC you on everything.
Guilty. Yeah. It sounds like you've heard this once or twice. I don't know.
A few times.
A few times.
So how do you get rid of that? Like, how do you change that mindset to where you're like, all right, I can relinquish this task. I can relinquish this role. I trust you to do the job. Like, how does that happen?
So there's some of it is internal, right? There's definitely that psychological component, which is really getting committed to the next thing. And the next thing might be just being the next level up in your business, right? Always say we're trying to do the work that's at or above our pay grade. We always talk about like, that's not at my pay grade. Well, no, this is at your pay grade, right? So what is it? And as you're growing a business, what you need to be focusing on is very different as you move up. So there's some degree to that psychological being like, no, you're going to be the boss. Okay. Like you've been complaining for years, you quit the job you had with a bad boss. A lot of times people have very negative associations with being a boss or being a manager and to go like get committed to that. Then I'm always like, it's baby steps. So what'll happen is people won't have any training. They won't have any screening for the employees. So they're assigning a task that person may not be well suited to. They give them no training. They depend on like them watching, like, like, oh, you'll learn on the job, right? Yeah. Okay. Then they give them unclear expectations and then the person fails.
And then we blame
and it's
them.
Not just and then you're like, oh, well, look, I can't get anybody good to do this job. So a lot of it is about, for me, when I work with people, it's like, let's just get it clear. Like what actually needs to be done? And then, I had somebody who was like, well, they're not like something was Xerox. I don't like the way this form looks. And I was like, really? It's the formatting that this is the most important thing. He's like, well, when you put it like that, it's not that important. I was like, so can we take it off the list? Like, let's take it off the list. Because, you've got an assistant who's doing a pretty good job at a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're just adding these weird little bits. So we do a lot of work on like what really needs to get done. And then is that person well suited to it? I like to do behavioral profiles, as well as, is it clear, right? Have you provided them with actual training? And is that training like written down? And this gets to the minimum viable structures. Like, it might only be 3 points, right?
Yeah.
And
they can make it their own a little bit. And you mentioned something earlier that I want to make sure that people caught. And if they didn't, I want to revisit it. And that is the fact that, so for me to create a policy or a procedure around something that I'm doing, and I am guilty of this. So I know my wife is probably listening to this right now and it's like, that's him. Every detail. Okay, this step. Now you open up this app, then you type in this, and then you go over to QuickBooks and you double check it's in there. But I love what you're saying about the minimum viable product or the minimum viable amount of information. So they make it their own. I don't want to hire someone who's going to be me. I want someone who's going to be better than me and who's going to take that position and put their twist on it. And if I'm giving them every single step along the way, then what difference can they make to it? But if I'm giving them 3 steps and allowing them leeway, then they can make improvements upon it. How do I empower them to make the improvements? And then what happens if they fail?
So this is one of the things I talk about, the acceptable error rate. Like I had a client, actually marketing agency, and she was going on like her first vacation. She was really worried about copy errors in the like social media posts, right? So, and exactly, like social media posts were like, it basically does disappear, right? Like these were not like
disappears in like a couple hours.
Right. Okay. So what we did was I was like, well, how many errors are tolerable? Like because if she actually ran hers, she probably would have known she had a few percent. So I was like, what's the percentage of like, because if somebody says it's got to be perfect, we're going to have a conversation like, really? Where does that come from? Does the client expect that? This is, again, the psychology part. People are setting these hurdles too high. But a lot of times, like, there is a threshold, in services, like, yeah, if I'm fixing like your pipes, like the pipes need to be fixed, right? And we have like code and standards. So what you're looking for though is like, what's the acceptable error rate? And it might be how long it takes you. So you might be like, absolutely has to be done to code. But the thing that I'm going to give wiggle room on is how long it takes. And I'm willing to, it's fine. I've been doing it for 20 years. It takes me 2 hours. Okay. Well, probably you should give up to 3 or maybe even 4 for somebody who's pretty new to the job, because like they will get a lot faster. You took 4 hours the first time, and like, trust me, the code is higher now, right?
Right.
So you can look at the acceptable error rate, and then you can put people out, and then you are able to actually assess the data. So you kind of like set the acceptable error rate, go in with them and be like, so if this isn't going to work, okay, if it's not going to get done in 3 hours, what would be the reasons? You don't say, are you going to get done in 3 hours? You don't just go like, what would be the reasons that would make it take longer? And allow them to like populate the objections. They're just giving you the excuses up front, sometimes raising valid points. Someone's just giving you excuses up front. And then you have a conversation about, oh, how are we going to overcome those? So you begin to set
Kasia,
this.
can you hang on a second?
Running on.
No, like I just need to take a break here. I got to go get some steel toe shoes, because like, I'll be danged if you ain't stepping on my toes. Like, just my toe, they worn off. Like, I don't even know what to say here. It's like, all right, I get it. I think that you and Julie, my wife, y'all got in cahoots before this episode, because this is, yeah. All right, keep going. Yeah.
So let's say it's the dishwasher loading. This was you tell me, Josh, what you got?
No, go ahead. I'll ask my question after.
Oh, okay. So every parent has their thing, right? So my dad, it was like loading the dishwasher. He would always come and like reorganize the dishwasher after you. So guess what? At some point, your kid, you don't load the dishwasher. Like, why? Oh, it's my chore. I got to load the dishwasher. But Dad's just going to come take all the dishes out. wash them again, even though they're going in the dishwasher, and then reorganize the whole situation, right? So if you look at it and you go, what's the acceptable error rate? What is the goal? The goal is to have the dishes clean, right? The goal is to have the job done well. Then you're like, okay, where am I going to put the acceptable error rate? And then how do I have a conversation, right? And this is the part sometimes it's like, I told them that. Did you? Number one, did you tell them? Number two, did they hear it?
Yeah, it was a clear message.
Right. And so the way that helping people have conversations, and then you can actually look at the information, like how long did it take somebody? Okay, when they came back and you asked them why it took that long, are they giving you some excuse that was not on the pre-populated list? Like, is there new information? And you could do that. I would say do a test run. You want to go on vacation. So for this client that I'd had, was like do a test run of a week, look at the information. And so the baby step, right? You're like, oh, okay. I took a whole week.
How long do we allow this to progress and go along before you start saying, you're just not getting it?
Well, I mean, I got a toolkit that's like, I got a lot of tools. So if somebody is highly resistant to something, we're going to go into the deep work. So this is I always tell people, I'm like a little bit woo-woo and a whole lot of business. So the woo-woo part, if you are just refusing, you've set a goal, you're committed to that goal. This is key to that goal, and you're sabotaging that process. We're going to go through more about like what's that hijacker. I'm not a therapist, so sometimes people have told me things where I'm like, you need to see a professional for this.
You got to get some help.
But a lot of times, like it's like I was saying that one, it's something that we've been telling ourselves. Like our parents told us this about work. We're not good at making money. The number of times somebody's like, oh, you have to work, no pain, no gain, right? So when you start, the ease comes in and things start to happen. You're like, I'm cheating. This doesn't make any sense. So you start to do things to make it harder, right? So you can have the pain. And then what you do is you start to destroy the gain. So there's a bunch of things there. If somebody's really resistant, we're going to get into like, where's that? What's the worldview? What's the next layer down? And you just got to peel that onion until you get to it. And then that's some real work. So at every point on the client, I mean, I think any coach who tells you that you don't ever have to do that is they're selling a nice system that the person's going to implement for 3 months. And then they're going to put it on the shelf, and then they're going to go back to doing what they've been doing before.
And we've all kind of experienced that, or we know somebody who's experienced a similar situation for sure. Josh, what was it that you were going to ask?
Yeah. So I was actually going to go back. So before you start working with someone, because I'm sure there's a lot of business owners listening to this, or managers, or people that just are to the point where they feel like this. Is there some questions or some things that they can think about, like, hey, am I ready for this, or am I ready for a service like this?
For coaching, I mean, if you're asking yourself whether you're ready for coaching, then you are ready for coaching. I always tell people, and I'm really open to I'll talk to anyone. I'm fascinated by business. So like, there's something, even if the conversation is, sometimes it's 45 minutes and you decide that you're not going to leave the job, right? You're not going to start your own company. It's not the right time. I'm like always game to talk to people. I think though, if you are wondering, right, if you should bring somebody else in for an outside perspective, then yeah, you should, because the people who are uncoachable are the ones who think they've got it all down, or they think that it's too dangerous to open that up. I feel for someone like me, because I work with business owners who are looking to grow businesses, I am very much, someone has to be committed to going out. They have to be thinking, I want to go out and I want to start a business that has employees, right? If you're working for someone else, or if you're a solo practitioner, got to be thinking, I want to build something that will exist outside of me, right? An organization that is not just me. So that's a little bit for me of a niche where there are other coaches who are more personal development or career coaches, or work with solo practitioners. So just in terms of, I think, asking yourself those questions will help you segment who you want to talk to as well. And sometimes I'm like, do you want off the shelf? Some people like off the shelf. Like,
and what do you mean? What do you mean by off the shelf? Like just here, this is what works and use this?
Yeah. Here's this how you set up your business. Here's how you do your value statements, or here's how you do it. If you like that, if that actually works well for you, you respond to that. Buy some of the books, right? And go and do some of the online seminars. I'm always like, look, if buying a book and taking an online seminar for a couple of $100 is going to change your life and your business, do it. That's the most efficient. Yeah. I'm not about do the easiest thing you can do. So what I look at was sometimes people really do want something that's very off the shelf. The idea of building that loose structure freaks them out too much. But a lot of times they'll go through that route and then they come back because they realize they try out a bunch of things and they're like, I don't want my business to look like this. I don't want it to look like that. And now you need to come to a coach who's going to help you figure out what you really want your business to look like. I don't think I answered your question though.
Yeah, you answered all mine.
Well, I think you gave some definite thoughts, because it's always challenging to know when you're at that level because you have to want to accept coaching, right? Like you can't just be like, well, I want to hire a coach and they're going to take care of everything for me. You have to be willing to accept that advice and that guidance. Otherwise, it's never going to work. So that's why I
usually say if you're running the numbers. Yeah, that's another one too, is people, if you're worried about the expense, then you're missing the point. Now there are coaches out there who charge $100,000, for like a 6-month program. So maybe
you might be worried about
not worried about the expense. But if you look at it, like when people, like it's always to say, what are you fixating on? And so people are like, well, I need to get the money. That's a big one I will hear sometimes. Is I got to make more money. And I'm like, oh, when was the last time that you made more? Like, so when somebody comes to hire you, they're like, okay, so once you fix this problem in my house and I rent it out and I get more money, then I'll pay you. No, right? You have to spend the money and invest up front. And so that's one of those things, is that when people have to make that, not just the emotional commitment, mental commitment, the time commitment, then also the money commitment. If you're not up for that, you're not going to succeed in the coaching because you're not prepared for it. So it's not, the money should freak you out a little bit, because it shouldn't be like a throwaway expense, but it also should be something where you really can see the value of it. And I'm like, the numbers always work out. I mean, that's the thing that's hard for me. People tell me the ROI and I'm like, well, there was that client where like we worked together and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it was like $75,000 a year annualized, I guess, for the last 10 years. And then there's other, and like I start running the numbers and all I get to is I should be charging $100,000. So I'm like, no, right? Like, so sometimes I'm like, and some clients, it's not about the money. I've had clients who were like, just, they wanted to go to something else, and obviously the money worked out, but they didn't come in with that intention. So.
Very good point.
So contractors, know your numbers so you can afford services like these to help your mental state, to help you get your business on the right track, or get whatever you want to accomplish with your goals. That's the biggest thing we see in the contracting world. I know Tersh is, he knows this as well as I do. Stop undercutting your competition just to get a job. It's not helping you.
Right. True. Well, pricing is such a big one in all of these, because what happens is people will raise when times are when things are busy, they'll like raise prices to get away from taking a client. And I'm like, well, actually what you should be thinking about is, who do I want to do business with? What are the criteria? What's the type of work we do? And then what's an appropriate price? And then if it's surge pricing, like I'm always like, you can charge somebody like, at, Disney World, right? They charge you if you want the ticket for the short line, right? You can pay more to cut the line.
Yeah.
That's not wrong, right? No. You're not saying I won't serve somebody who can only pay the base rate, but you are saying if somebody can pay the higher rate, then they're going to get in queue faster, especially with something like contracting, where you are people. I mean, my contractor client, he's framing out in November now. I mean, that's the earliest you're going to get somebody.
Ooh.
So, and that's in New England, right? You're thinking, so I would say that a lot of the pricing situation is you're not gouging people. You just need to know what you're billing them for. And if you're going to charge me a premium price, you better show up on time.
Oh yeah.
You better do the job right. The estimate better be good. right? So you can, and all of those things you ought to do anyway. Like if you're running your business well, you're not overscheduled. If you run your business well, your estimates are like this, right? And someone else can produce them, and you start to think about, as that's where I work with people, as a business is running better, then you can absolutely justify not the expense of paying for your premium service.
Yeah.
Even with emergency work, it's like you can have a subscription.
Yes.
Doctors do it, but you can have a subscription. You pay a couple, AAA, pay a couple $100 a year, maybe not. And that means that we have a hotline for after hours work.
100%.
Okay. Yeah.
I love it. That's great.
I tell people more with that. Pay for myself, like the first 20 minutes. Like I'm offering this up for free.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Just implement what I'm saying. You don't have to worry about how much it costs.
Yeah.
Keziah, how do people get in touch with you? How do they learn more about you?
You can check out through my website. So that's my business is called Cassia Partners. So it's www.cassia-partners.com. Or LinkedIn is actually a great way to find me. You can find me on Facebook, but for the most part, LinkedIn's an easiest way to find me. Okay. And I know you guys will have some contact info. I'm sure Absolutely. When this goes up to podcast. And I love talking to people. Reach out anytime.
Will do. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we forgot to ask you? Please don't step on my toes anymore. My feet hurt so bad right now.
Well, I think you brought up something that's actually really interesting is when we talk about delegation, sometimes I get people who are like, oh no, I do delegate. And they delegated to this 14-point checklist plus this 6-page this and that. And they're like, I've delegated to this massively over-engineered manual. And I'm like, great. So you have robots who work for you, you programmed this. So there is, I think that's something to keep in mind when you have that temptation. That is actually a form of you resisting delegation when you're like, I got to make it exactly. So that can be something where I'm again it's important. The dishes need to be clean. What's the most important thing? The dishes are clean.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's just start with what's the most important thing.
Let's simplify.
I'm just writing down, get the dishes cleaned. That's going to be my motto from now on.
Right, exactly. And not did they stack them exactly the way that I wanted them to, right? And is there sticky egg on something when I have to wash it again? Are the dishes clean?
Yes.
I love that.
Thank you so much for coming on today's show. You brightened it up because, man, well, I know some stuff I got to work on. I mean, thanks.
It's always a work in progress, isn't it?
The point is not to leave. The point is not to leave you depressed. There's hope. There's hope at the end of the tunnel.
There is.
Tersh is going home after this.
Yeah.
He's done.
I did have somebody once tell me, a client once, he's like, yeah, I had to take a nap after that strategy session. My head hurt. And I was like, that's not I'm so sorry. I need to work on I got to work on my bedside manner if I'm giving people a headache.
That's funny. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today's show. Awesome. And thank you so much for all the information you shared with us.
Absolutely.
This was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you, everybody that's listening to or watching this episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast. This is a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. I hope you found value in today's episode, if nothing else, at my expense. I found value in the show today, and I hope you will connect and learn more with all of us. And like I said, I'll put everybody's contact information in the show notes as well. So with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful and safe week. And until we talk again next week, see you later.